The training facility on planet Velthara was cold. Not just in temperature, but in everything. The walls were gray metal. The floors were gray metal. Even the air felt gray and heavy. This was where young Velthari cubs came to become warriors. This was where they learned to fight, to survive, and to serve the great Velthari Empire. Commander Rothax stood in the scanning room with his arms crossed. He was a tall Velthari with dark blue scales and eyes like yellow fire. Behind him, 12 young cubs waited in a line. They were small, thin, and scared. Their scales were pale, and their tails hung low to the ground. They looked at the scanner with fear in their eyes. The scanner was a large machine that stood in the center of the room. It was old technology, but it never lied. It measured strength, speed, intelligence, and fighting spirit. It could see inside a cub and know what they would become. Every cub in the Empire went through the scanner. The strong ones became warriors. The weak ones went somewhere else. Commander Rothax pressed the button. The scanner hummed and glowed with blue light. One by one, the cubs stepped forward. One by one, the scanner made its judgment. And one by one, the same words appeared on the screen. Feeble. Unsuitable for combat training. Recommended for labor assignment. Rothax watched with growing anger. 12 cubs. 12 failures. This batch was the worst he had ever seen. He looked at the small creatures and felt disgust. They were thin and weak. Some of them were shaking. One of them, a small female with light gray scales, had tears in her eyes. Pathetic, Rothax said. His voice was cold and sharp. Every single one of you. The scanner does not lie. You are feeble. You will never be warriors. The cubs said nothing. They just stood there, looking at the floor. They had heard these words before. They had been told they were weak since the day they were born. Now the scanner had made it official. Rothax turned to his assistant, a younger Velthari named Kravik. Send them to the labor colonies. There is no point in wasting resources on them. Kravik nodded and made a note on his tablet. Yes, Commander. The transport leaves in 3 days. That should have been the end of it. That should have been the last day these cubs spent at the training facility. But fate had other plans. Because at that exact moment, the door to the scanning room opened and a human walked in. Her name was Yuna. She was short by human standards, with black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore the standard uniform of a Galactic Alliance instructor. Dark, gray, with silver buttons. She carried a small bag over her shoulder and a tablet in her hand. She looked around the room with calm, curious eyes. Rothax stared at her. Who are you? This is a restricted area. Yuna smiled politely. I am Instructor Yuna from Earth. The Alliance sent me as a temporary replacement. Your previous combat instructor had to leave for medical reasons. I will be taking over his duties for the next month. Rothax's yellow eyes narrowed. He did not like humans. Nobody in the Empire really liked humans. They were strange creatures, soft and weak-looking, with no scales, no claws, and no natural weapons. They came from a small planet at the edge of the galaxy. They had only joined the Alliance 50 years ago, and yet, somehow, they had earned a reputation as fierce warriors. Rothax did not believe it. He thought humans were overrated. They were small and fragile. How could they possibly train Velthari warriors? There must be some mistake, Rothax said. We did not request a human instructor. Yuna pulled out a document from her bag. Here are my orders. Signed by Alliance Command. I am to train the next batch of cubs for basic combat skills. Rothax took the document and read it. His jaw tightened. The orders were real. He had no choice but to accept this human into his facility. He handed the document back to Yuna with a grunt. Fine, but you are wasting your time. He pointed at the 12 cubs. This is your batch. The scanner has already judged them. They are feeble, unsuitable for combat. We are sending them to labor colonies in 3 days. Yuna looked at the cubs. They were still standing in their line, heads down, tails low. They looked so small and so sad. She walked closer to them, and they flinched away from her. They had never seen a human before. They did not know what to expect. Yuna knelt down so she was at their eye level. She looked at each of them carefully. She saw their pale scales and thin bodies. She saw the fear in their eyes. She saw the small female who had been crying. "Hello," Yuna said softly. "My name is Yuna. What are your names?" The cubs looked at each other. Nobody had ever asked them that before. Nobody had ever spoken to them in such a gentle voice. Slowly, one of them answered. "I am Vex," said the small female with gray scales. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I am Toric," said a thin male with spots on his back. One by one, they gave their names. Vex, Toric, Rena, Skal, Brix, Nyla, Fen, Dara, Chorus, Zella, Mox, and Pip. 12 cubs, 12 names, 12 lives that had been judged worthless by a machine. Yuna stood up and turned to face Commander Rothax. There was something different in her eyes now, something hard and determined. "I want this batch," she said. Rothax laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "You want them? They are feeble. The scanner said so. They cannot be trained. The scanner measures their bodies," Yuna said. "It does not measure their hearts. Give me 1 week with them. If they show no improvement, you can send them to the labor colonies. But give me 1 week." Rothax stared at her. This human was either very brave or very stupid, probably both. But what did it matter? The cubs were worthless anyway. If this human wanted to waste her time on them, that was her problem. 1 week, Rothax said. After that, they go to the colonies. And when you fail, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that I told you so. Yuna nodded. "I will remember." She turned back to the cubs. They were looking at her with wide eyes. Nobody had ever fought for them before. Nobody had ever wanted them. And now, this strange human was asking for a chance to train them. "Come with me," Yuna said. "We have a lot of work to do." The cubs followed her out of the scanning room. They did not know what was going to happen. They did not know if this human could really help them. But for the first time in their lives, someone had looked at them and seen something other than failure. For the first time, someone had seen hope. And that was how it all began. In a cold gray room, on a cold gray planet, 12 feeble cubs met the human who would change their lives forever. The training barracks for the cubs was in the oldest part of the facility. The walls were cracked. The heating system barely worked. The beds were hard metal slabs with thin blankets. This was where they put the unwanted cubs, the ones nobody expected to succeed. Yuna stood in the middle of the barracks and looked around. The 12 cubs sat on their beds, watching her with nervous eyes. They still did not know what to think of this human. She was so different from the Velthari instructors they had known. She was soft and small, with no scales or claws. She smelled strange, like flowers and something warm. And she smiled at them. Nobody ever smiled at them. "First things first," Yuna said. "Have you all eaten today?" The cubs looked at each other. Toric, the thin male with spots, shook his head. "We get food once a day. In the evening. That is the rule for cubs like us." Yuna's smile faded. "Once a day? That is not enough. Growing cubs need to eat more than that." She reached into her bag and pulled out several packages. "I brought some food from the human section of the station. It might taste different, but it is good. Come, eat." The cubs hesitated. They had been taught that taking food outside of mealtimes was wrong. They had been punished for it before. But Yuna kept holding out the packages with a kind look on her face. Finally, little Pip, the smallest cub in the group, stepped forward and took one. He bit into the food carefully. His eyes went wide. The other cubs rushed forward. Soon they were all eating, their tails wagging for the first time in a long time. Yuna watched them with a warm feeling in her heart. These were children. Just children. and they had been treated like garbage. "From now on," Yuna said, "you will eat 3 times a day. I will make sure of it." After they finished eating, Yuna took them outside to the training yard. It was a large, open space with hard ground and high walls. Other groups of cubs were training there, doing push-ups and running laps and hitting each other with practice weapons. They were all bigger and stronger than Yuna's group. They looked at the feeble batch and laughed. "Look at them," shouted one large cub with dark red scales. "The rejects are here. What are you going to do? Cry at us?" Yuna's cubs lowered their heads in shame. They were used to this. They were used to being mocked and bullied. But Yuna stepped forward and looked at the large cub calmly. "What is your name?" she asked. The cub puffed out his chest. "I am Draxor. I am the strongest in my batch. The scanner said I have elite potential." "Good for you," Yuna said. "Now mind your own training and leave my cubs alone." Draxor laughed. "Your cubs? Those weaklings? You are wasting your time, human. They will be scrubbing floors in the labor colonies by next week." Yuna did not argue. She simply turned back to her cubs and led them to a quiet corner of the training yard. The other instructors watched her with curiosity. What was this human going to do? What Yuna did shocked everyone. She did not make her cubs run laps. She did not make them do push-ups. She did not give them weapons or teach them fighting stances. Instead, she sat down on the ground and told them to sit with her in a circle. "Today," Yuna said, "we are going to play a game." The cubs stared at her. "A game?" Vex asked. "But this is training time. We are supposed to exercise and practice combat." "There are many kinds of training," Yuna said. "Not all of them involve hitting things. Now, the game is simple. We are going to pass this ball around the circle. When you catch it, you say one thing you like. It can be anything. A food, a color, a place. Then you throw the ball to someone else." She pulled a small, soft ball from her bag. The cubs looked at it like it was an alien object. They had never played with a ball before. They had never played any games at all. Yuna threw the ball to Neela, a quiet female with blue-green scales. Neela caught it clumsily and looked at Yuna with panic in her eyes. "I do not know what I like," Neela said. "Nobody has ever asked me that." "Think about it," Yuna said gently. "There must be something. A food that tastes good? A time of day when you feel happy?" Neela thought for a long moment. "I like the stars," she finally said. "When I look at them at night, I feel less afraid." Yuna smiled. "That is beautiful, Neela. Now throw the ball to someone else." The game continued. Slowly, the cubs began to open up. Pip liked sweet food. Torek liked running, even though he was not fast. Fen liked stories about heroes. Vex liked the color purple because it reminded her of the flowers on her home planet. Dara liked sleeping because it was the only time she did not feel scared. The other instructors watched from across the yard. They whispered to each other. What was this human doing? This was not training. This was nonsense. Commander Rothax came out to observe, and his face twisted with disapproval. "This is foolishness," he said to Kravik. "She is making them soft. She is making them even weaker." But Yuna heard him and did not care. She knew what she was doing. She was building something that the Velthari instructors did not understand. She was building trust. Over the next few days, Yuna continued her strange methods. She made the cubs eat together at a big table, sharing food and talking. She taught them songs from Earth and made them sing together. She created teams for simple challenges, like building towers out of blocks or solving puzzles. And she always made sure they helped each other. "If one of you falls, the others pick them up," Yuna said. "If one of you is tired, the others give them strength. You are not 12 separate cubs. You are one team, one family." The cubs did not understand at first. In Velthari culture, warriors competed against each other. The strong survived. The weak were left behind. That was the natural order. But Yuna showed them a different way, a human way. When Pip struggled to carry a heavy box, Yuna did not tell him to try harder. She told Chorus and Mox to help him. When Zella could not solve a puzzle, Yuna did not call her stupid. She told Rena and Skal to work with her. Every challenge became a team effort. Every success was shared. Slowly, something began to change. The cubs started talking to each other. Not just about training, but about their lives. They learned that Brix had lost his parents when he was very young. They learned that Dara had nightmares every night. They learned that Vex used to have a sister who was sold to another planet. They shared their pain, and somehow, the pain became smaller. They started laughing. Real laughter. Not the nervous sounds they made when instructors were watching. They made jokes and teased each other, and played games during their rest time. The barracks that had been so cold and sad began to feel warm. Commander Rothax watched all of this with growing frustration. "She is ruining them," he said. "When the week is over, they will be softer than ever. The scanner will probably read them as even more feeble." But Kravik was not so sure. He had noticed something that Rothax had missed. The cubs were standing straighter now. Their tails were not dragging on the ground anymore, and when they looked at Yuna, there was something new in their eyes. It was not fear. It was not despair. It was hope. And something even stronger. It was love. On the fourth day, Yuna gathered the cubs together after their evening meal. They sat in their circle, and she looked at each of them with serious eyes. "Tomorrow," she said, "the real training begins. It will be hard. It will hurt. But I need you to trust me. Do you trust me?" The cubs looked at each other. Then they looked back at Yuna, and one by one, they nodded. "We trust you," Vex said. "You are the first person who ever believed in us. We will do whatever you ask." Yuna smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. "Good. Because I am going to show you what humans know about being warriors, and it is nothing like what you have been taught." The cubs did not sleep much that night. They were excited and scared and hopeful all at once. They did not know what tomorrow would bring. But they knew one thing for certain: they were not alone anymore. They had each other. They had Yuna, and somehow, that made them feel stronger than any scanner could measure. The sun rose over planet Velthara, painting the gray sky with shades of orange and pink. Yuna was already awake. She stood in the training yard, watching the light spread across the hard ground. Today was the day. Today, she would show her cubs what it truly meant to be a warrior. The cubs arrived one by one, rubbing sleep from their eyes. They stood in a line before Yuna, their backs straight and their tails still. 4 days ago, they would have slouched and looked at the ground. Now they looked at their instructor with eager eyes. "Good morning," Yuna said. "Today I am going to tell you a story. Sit down and listen carefully." The cubs sat. Around them, other training groups were already running and fighting and shouting. But Yuna's group sat in silence, waiting to hear what their human teacher had to say. "Long ago," Yuna began, "on my planet Earth, there was a great war. It was the most terrible war in human history. Millions of people died. Cities were destroyed. Families were torn apart. It seemed like the darkness would never end." The cubs listened with wide eyes. They knew about war. The Velthari Empire was always at war with someone. During this war, Yuna continued, there was a group of soldiers who were trapped behind enemy lines. They were surrounded. They had no food, no medicine, and no hope of rescue. Their commander was dead. They were just ordinary soldiers, not elite warriors. Most of them were young, barely older than you. "What did they do?" Pip asked. Yuna smiled. "They did something that the enemy did not expect. They did not give up. They did not surrender. Instead, they looked out for each other. The ones who had food shared it with everyone. The ones who were strong carried the ones who were injured. They told stories to keep their spirits up. They sang songs in the darkness." Did they escape?" Vex asked. "They held out for 32 days, Yuna said. 32 days without proper food or supplies. 32 days, while the enemy attacked them again and again. And when rescue finally came, do you know what the rescuers found? The cubs shook their heads. They found that every single soldier was still alive. Not because they were stronger or faster than the enemy. Not because they had better weapons. They survived because they fought for each other. They survived because they refused to let their brothers and sisters fall. Yuna stood up and looked at her cubs. That is the secret of human warriors. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest or the smartest. But we have something that other species do not understand. We have heart. We have love. And we never, ever give up on each other. The cubs were silent. They had never heard anything like this before. Velthari training was about being stronger than everyone else. It was about crushing your enemies and proving your worth. But Yuna was talking about something completely different. The scanner says you are feeble, Yuna said. And maybe you are. In your bodies, but I have seen your hearts over these past few days. I have seen how you help each other. I have seen how you care for each other. And I am telling you right now that you have more warrior spirit than half the soldiers in this facility. Torek raised his hand. But Instructor Yuna, how can we fight if we are weak? The other cubs will crush us in combat. Torek. Yuna knelt down to look at him. Let me tell you another secret. In a real fight, strength is not everything. Speed is not everything. Do you know what wins most fights? What? Torek asked. The will to keep going, Yuna said. The refusal to stay down. I have seen small humans defeat large ones because the small ones wanted it more. I have seen injured soldiers keep fighting when healthy ones ran away. The body has limits, but the spirit does not. If you believe in yourself and fight for each other, you can do things that seem impossible. She stood up again. Now, we train for real. But my training is different from what you are used to. I will make your bodies stronger. Yes, but more importantly, I will make your heart stronger. I will teach you to never give up. I will teach you to fight not for glory, but for the ones beside you. The real training began. Yuna started with simple exercises. Running, jumping, climbing. But she did everything differently. When the cubs ran laps, they ran together. If one fell behind, the others slowed down. If one fell down, the others helped them up. They finished together, or they did not finish at all. The Velthari way is to leave the weak behind, Yuna explained. The human way is to carry them forward. Every member of a team matters. Every life has value. She taught them to do push-ups together, counting in unison. She taught them to lift heavy things as a group, each one taking part of the weight. She taught them to climb walls by making ladders with their bodies, the stronger ones boosting the smaller ones up. The other instructors watched and shook their heads. This is madness, they said. She is teaching them to be weak. Warriors must be independent. Warriors must be strong on their own. But Yuna did not listen. She knew what she was doing. In the afternoon, she taught them about combat. But again, her methods were strange. She did not focus on attacking. She focused on protecting. In human martial arts, Yuna said, we have a concept called protecting the pack. It means that in a fight, you do not just think about yourself. You think about your teammates. You watch their backs. You cover their weaknesses. She put them in pairs and made them practice. One cub would attack, and the other would defend not themselves, but their partner standing behind them. It was hard. It required trust. The defender had to believe that their partner would do the same for them. When you fight for yourself, you have one warrior, Yuna said. When you fight for each other, you have 12. And 12 warriors fighting with their hearts are worth more than 100 fighting alone. By the end of the day, the cubs were exhausted. Their muscles ached. Their scales were dusty. But there was a new light in their eyes. For the first time, they were starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could be something more than failures. That night, Yuna sat with them in the barracks. She told them more stories about human warriors, about soldiers who threw themselves on explosives to save their friends, about doctors who ran into danger to treat the wounded, about ordinary people who became heroes not because they were strong, but because they cared. Being a warrior is not about being the most powerful, Yuna said. It is about having the courage to do what is right. It is about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. It is about standing up when everyone else sits down. Vex raised her hand. Instructor Yuna, why do you care so much about us? We are just feeble cubs from a far planet. You do not even know us. Yuna looked at the small gray female. She saw the hope and the confusion in those young eyes. Because you remind me of someone, she said softly. When I was young, I was also told I was too weak, too small, too different. My teachers said I would never be a warrior. But someone believed in me. Someone gave me a chance. And now, I am giving you the same chance. What happened to that person? Pip asked. Yuna's eyes grew distant. She died. In a battle, protecting her team. She was the bravest warrior I ever knew. And she was not much bigger than you, Pip. She taught me that courage has nothing to do with size. The cubs were quiet. They understood now. Yuna was not just teaching them. She was honoring someone she had loved and lost. She was passing on a legacy. We will not let you down, Vex said firmly. We will make you proud. We will make her proud. The other cubs nodded. Their faces were set with determination. They were no longer the scared, sad creatures who had stood in the scanning room. They were becoming something new, something the scanner had not predicted. They were becoming warriors of the heart. Yuna smiled and wiped a tear from her eye. I already am proud of you. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow we train harder. And in 2 days, you will show this whole facility what you are made of. The cubs lay down on their beds, but none of them slept right away. They whispered to each other in the darkness, making promises. Promises to fight for each other. Promises to never give up. Promises to prove that the scanner was wrong. And somewhere in the facility, Commander Rothax looked at the schedule and smiled a cold smile. In 2 days, the feeble batch would face the elite batch in combat trials. He was certain they would fail. He was certain the humans' foolish methods would be exposed. He was about to be very, very wrong. The morning of the 6th day arrived with dark clouds covering the sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance. It seemed like even the weather knew that something important was about to happen. Commander Rothax had called an assembly. Every instructor, every cub, and every officer in the facility gathered in the great arena. This was the largest training space on the base. A circular pit surrounded by viewing platforms. Important visitors sometimes came to watch the combat trials here. Today, there were no visitors. But everyone knew that something unusual was happening. Rothax stood on the main platform, his yellow eyes scanning the crowd. He raised his hand, and silence fell over the arena. Today, he announced, we will have a special demonstration. As you all know, a human instructor has been working with the feeble batch for the past week. She has used strange methods that go against everything we know about training warriors. There were murmurs in the crowd. Everyone had heard about Yuna and her cubs. Everyone had seen them playing games and singing songs and helping each other like some kind of family group. Most thought it was a joke. The human claims that her methods work, Rothax continued. She claims that these feeble cubs can become warriors. So I have arranged a test. Today, the feeble batch will face the elite batch in combat trials. A gasp went through the crowd. The elite batch was the best group in the facility. They had the highest scores, the strongest bodies, and the most aggressive attitudes. Their leader, Draxor, had beaten cubs twice his size in single combat. Putting them against the feeble batch was not a test. It was an execution. Yuna stood at the edge of the arena with her 12 cubs. She had known this was coming. In fact, she had expected it. Rothax wanted to humiliate her and prove that humans knew nothing about training warriors. He wanted to break her cubs in front of everyone. Instructor Yuna, Rothax called out. Do you accept this challenge? Or do you wish to surrender now and save your cubs from embarrassment? Una stepped forward. Her voice was calm and clear. We accept. The crowd went silent. Even Rothax looked surprised. He had expected her to refuse. He had expected her to make excuses. But this human was either very brave or very foolish. Very well, Rothax said with a thin smile. The rules are simple. This will be a team battle. All 12 cubs from each batch will fight at once. The team that forces all members of the other team to submit wins. No killing, no permanent injury. Other than that, anything goes. Una nodded. She turned to her cubs, who were standing behind her with fear in their eyes. They had heard the rules. They knew what they were up against. Draxor and his elite batch were already warming up on the other side of the arena, laughing and making cruel jokes. They are going to crush us, Fen whispered. They are twice our size, and 3 times as mean, Brix added. Una gathered them in a tight circle. She looked at each of them, one by one. Vex, Toric, Rena, Skal, Brix, Nyla, Fen, Dara, Chorus, Zella, Mox, and Pip. 12 cubs, her cubs. Listen to me, she said softly. I am not going to lie to you. They are bigger than you. They are stronger than you. If you fight them the way they expect, you will lose. The cubs nodded. They had figured that out already. But you are not going to fight them the way they expect, Una continued. You are going to fight like humans. You are going to fight together. Every single moment. You watch out for each other. If someone is in trouble, you help them. If someone falls, you protect them. Do not try to win. Try to survive. Try to protect your family. But how can we beat them if we do not try to win? Mox asked. Una smiled. The best way to win is to not lose. They expect you to fall apart. They expect you to panic and run. But if you stay together, if you hold your ground, they will not know what to do. They have never faced enemies who fight like a pack. She put her hand in the center of the circle. One team, one family. Together, one by one, the cubs put their hands on top of hers. Together, they said. The bell rang. The trial was about to begin. The 2 batches faced each other across the arena floor. Draxor stood at the front of his elite batch, cracking his knuckles. He was huge, with muscles bulging under his dark red scales. His 11 teammates spread out behind him, forming an aggressive V-shape. Una's cubs stood in a tight circle, facing outward. They were small and pale compared to the elite batch. But there was something different about them now. They were not shaking. They were not looking at the ground. They stood straight, and their eyes were focused. Draxor laughed. Look at them! Standing in a little ball. This will be over in seconds. Begin, Commander Rothax shouted. The elite batch charged. They were fast and powerful, their feet pounding on the arena floor like thunder. They expected the feeble batch to scatter like frightened animals. They expected easy prey. What they got was something else entirely. The feeble batch did not scatter. They moved as one unit, their circle shifting to meet the charge. When Draxor swung at Vex, Toric was there to block him. When another elite cub tried to grab Pip, Chorus and Mox pulled him away and Nyla struck back. They moved like a single organism, covering each other, protecting each other. The elite batch had never seen anything like it. They were trained to fight one-on-one. They were trained to dominate single opponents. But they did not know how to fight a team that acted like a pack of wolves. The first few minutes were chaos. The elite batch attacked again and again, but they could not break through. Every time they tried to isolate one cub, the others closed ranks and pushed them back. The feeble cubs took hits, many hits, but they did not fall. When one was knocked down, the others formed a wall around them until they could stand again. What is happening? Kravik whispered from the viewing platform. They should have been finished by now. Commander Rothax said nothing. His yellow eyes were fixed on the battle below. Draxor was getting angry. He was the strongest cub in the facility. He had won every fight he had ever been in. But now these weak little creatures were making him look foolish. He roared and charged at the center of their formation, and that was when the feeble batch showed what they had learned. As Draxor pushed into their circle, Vex dropped low and grabbed his legs. At the same moment, Torek and Rena pushed against his shoulders. Skal and Brix hit him from the sides. Draxor was strong enough to fight off one or two of them, but he could not fight off 6 at once. The mighty Draxor fell to the ground with a crash. The crowd gasped. The elite batch froze. Their leader, their unbeatable champion, was on the floor, and 6 small cubs were holding him down. "Submit!" Vex shouted, pressing her weight on Draxor's back. Draxor thrashed and roared. But every time he tried to rise, another cub pushed him back down. He was stronger than any of them individually, but together, they were stronger than him. "Submit!" Vex shouted again. For a long moment, Draxor struggled. His face was pressed into the dirt. His teammates were too shocked to help him. Finally, with a growl of pure rage, he slapped the ground 3 times. The signal for submission. The crowd erupted. Some were cheering. Some were booing. Most were simply stunned. The great Draxor, the elite champion, had been taken down by the feeble batch. But the battle was not over. There were still 11 elite cubs on the field. "Get them!" one of the elite cubs screamed. The battle resumed, more intense than before. The elite batch was furious now. They attacked with everything they had, and slowly, they began to make progress. One by one, the feeble cubs started to fall. First Pip went down, overwhelmed by a cub twice his size, then Neela, then Brix. They fought hard, but their bodies were simply not strong enough to keep going. 6 feeble cubs remained standing against 9 elite cubs, but they did not give up. Vex rallied the survivors. "Hold the line," she screamed. "For Yuna. For each other." The 6 remaining cubs formed a new circle, tighter than before. They were bruised and exhausted, but their eyes burned with determination. They had already done what nobody thought possible. They had taken down Draxor. Now they would show how long they could last. The elite batch attacked again, and again, and again. The feeble cubs fell one by one. Torek went down protecting Rena. Chorus fell while shielding Mox. Zella collapsed after taking 5 hits that were meant for others. Each one fell fighting not for themselves, but for their teammates. In the end, only Vex was left standing. She was surrounded by elite cubs. Her body was covered in bruises. She could barely lift her arms, but she refused to kneel. She refused to submit. "Give up," shouted the elite cub in front of her. "It is over. You lost." Vex spat blood on the ground. "It is not over until I say it is over." She raised her fists and waited for the final attack. But before the elite cubs could move, a voice rang out across the arena. "Stop." It was Commander Rothax. The arena fell silent. Every eye turned to Commander Rothax. He stood on the viewing platform, with a strange expression on his face. It was not anger. It was not satisfaction. It was something that nobody had ever seen on the cold commander's face before. It was confusion. "The trial is over," Rothax announced. "The elite batch wins by submission count." On the arena floor, the elite cubs raised their fists in victory. But their celebration felt hollow. They had won. Yes. But they had lost their champion in the first few minutes. They had struggled against cubs half their size. And even now, the last feeble cub was still standing, refusing to kneel. Yuna ran onto the arena floor and gathered her cubs. They were all battered and bruised. Some of them could barely move. But when they saw their instructor, they smiled. "We tried," Torek said weakly. "We tried our best." "You did more than try," Yuna said, tears running down her face. "You were magnificent." She helped them up one by one. The other instructors watched in silence. They had come expecting to see a slaughter. They had expected the feeble batch to crumble in seconds. Instead, they had witnessed something that would be talked about for years. 12 feeble cubs had stood against the elite batch. They had fought as one. They had taken down the strongest cub in the facility, and they had lasted longer than anyone thought possible. How did they do it? Kravik whispered. The scanner said they were feeble. The scanner is never wrong, but the scanner had been wrong. Or maybe the scanner simply did not measure what truly mattered. Commander Rothax descended from the viewing platform and walked across the arena floor. The crowd held its breath. Everyone expected him to mock the feeble batch. Everyone expected him to punish Yuna for embarrassing the facility. But Rothax did something unexpected. He stopped in front of Vex, the small gray female who had led the final stand. She looked up at him with defiant eyes, waiting for his cruelty. You took down Draxer, Rothax said. We took him down together, Vex corrected. I did not do it alone. Rothax stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to face the entire arena. Bring the scanner, he ordered. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The scanner was brought out and placed in the center of the arena. Rothax pointed at the feeble batch. Scan them again. The crowd leaned forward. The feeble cubs lined up before the scanner, the same way they had lined up just 1 week ago. Back then, they had been scared and hopeless. Now they stood tall, leaning on each other for support, their eyes filled with pride. One by one, they stepped forward. One by one, the scanner hummed and glowed and made its judgment. The first cub was Vex. She stepped into the light, and the scanner processed her data. The room was so quiet that everyone could hear the machine working. Then the words appeared on the screen. Warrior potential. High. Classification. Earthborn warrior type. The crowd gasped. High potential? Earthborn warrior? These were classifications that had never been used before. The scanner had created a new category, based on something it had never seen. Torek went next. The same classification appeared, then Rena, then Pip, then all the others. 12 cubs, 12 new readings. Every single one was labeled Earthborn Warrior Type. Commander Rothax stared at the screen. His hands were shaking. In all his years, he had never seen the scanner change its mind so dramatically. It was supposed to be impossible. What did you do to them? He asked Yuna. Yuna smiled. I did not do anything to them. I just showed them what they already had inside. The scanner measures strength of body, but humans know that true warriors are made from strength of heart. She looked at her cubs with pride. They were never feeble. They just needed someone to believe in them. The arena erupted in noise. Some were cheering for the feeble batch. Some were arguing about what it meant. The elite batch stood in a corner, looking stunned. Draxer's face was dark, with anger and shame. He had been beaten by cubs the scanner had called worthless. But the feeble cubs did not care about any of that. They gathered around Yuna, hugging her and each other, laughing and crying at the same time. They had done it. They had proven everyone wrong. What happens to us now? Pip asked. Commander Rothax heard the question. He walked over to the group, and everyone tensed. Would he still send them to the labor colonies? Would he find some excuse to get rid of them? But Rothax surprised them all again. You will stay in the training program, he said. Vex looked up at him. And Instructor Yuna, will she stay too? Rothax looked at the human woman. She was small and soft and nothing like a Velthari warrior. But somehow she had done what no Velthari instructor could do. She had turned failures into fighters. If she wishes to stay, Rothax said slowly, I will not object. Yuna bowed her head. Thank you, Commander. I would like to stay. The days that followed were different. Word spread through the facility about what had happened. Cubs from other batches started watching Yuna's training sessions. They saw how she taught teamwork and protection and sacrifice. They saw how her cubs fought for each other instead of against each other. Some of the other instructors were curious. They asked Yuna questions about human training methods. She answered patiently, explaining the philosophy behind her approach. Not everyone agreed with her, but many began to think that maybe, just maybe, the Velthari way was not the only way. Draxor never forgot his defeat. But to everyone's surprise, he did not seek revenge. Instead, he approached Vex one day in the training yard. How did you do it? He asked. His voice was not angry. It was genuinely curious. I am stronger than you. Faster than you. How did you take me down? Vex looked at him. A week ago, she would have run away from this conversation. Now she stood her ground. Because I was not alone, she said. When I fight for my team. That gives me strength that the scanner cannot measure. Draxer thought about this for a long time. Could you teach me? He finally asked. Could you teach me to fight like that? It was not the question anyone expected. But Vex smiled and nodded. Yes, we can teach you. But first, you have to learn something hard. What? How to trust others. How to let them help you. How to fight for something bigger than yourself. It was not easy. But over time, even some of the elite cubs began to train with Yuna's batch. The old ways did not disappear overnight. The Velthari still valued strength and power, but now they also began to understand that there was another kind of strength. The strength of the pack. The strength of the heart. Months later, Yuna stood in the same scanning room where she had first met her cubs. She was preparing to leave. Her temporary assignment was over, and Earth was calling her home. Her 12 cubs stood before her. They were bigger now. Stronger. But more importantly, they were confident. They were happy. They were warriors. Do you have to go? Pip asked. He was not so small anymore. Yuna knelt down and hugged him. I do. But I will come back to visit. And I will be watching your careers. I expect great things from all of you. Vex stepped forward. She was the leader of the group now, officially recognized by the facility. We will make you proud. Instructor Yuna, we will never forget what you taught us. I know you will, Yuna said. And remember, you are not just warriors of the Velthari Empire. You are Earth-born warriors. You fight with your hearts. You protect each other. You never give up. The cubs saluted her. A gesture they had learned from human military traditions. Yuna saluted back, her eyes bright with tears. As she walked toward the transport that would take her away, she turned back one last time. 12 young warriors stood in a perfect line, their heads held high, their eyes shining with the spirit she had given them. The scanner had called them feeble, but she had always seen them for what they truly were. Mini Earthborn warriors. And that was exactly what they had become.